Alright, today we are going to solve Battle 4 of the Microsoft Excel World Championship qualifying rounds. This one is called Ship the World, so let's give you a quick overview. Basically we have some ships with some metrics here regarding how much they can carry, what their capacity is, what their weight is, and so on. Then we have a load of goods with weight, and the case asks to calculate the cost of shipping these goods. And the cost is always the weight of the ship multiplied by the distance it travels. So you either have to calculate the weight or the distance travelled. They have this map, which is land and water and a bunch of ports. These grey cells are the ports, and the ship can travel basically from one of these ports to the home port, which is this black one, Port Excel. And there are these canals which are either open or closed depending on the size of the ship. So I solved this last question differently to how I've seen other people do it. Other people kind of solved it for a small ship, then a big ship, then a large ship, whereas I did it all in one go. So I will show that. Overall, this case was pretty good. I quite liked it because I have a finance background, and it's a little bit financial. Some things really annoy me though, like it's just a bit clunky. The fact that these cells here in the max weight are merged just makes it a little bit awkward, and the same as the fact that the ship types here move cells, so you can't just copy formulas down, you have to adjust the columns. It just makes it a bit clunky. When I did this for real as well, I lost out on a ton of points. Most of the questions have an example with them just to help you, get your solution for the first one. When I do these cases, I normally read the question, and if I can understand it straight away, I just do the question. I don't look at the steps for the example because there's no point. But what I missed is in the example, it tells you your rounding. So round your answer to one decimal place. This is the question. This is the example. I didn't bother reading the example because I feel like the full question should be in the question section, including whether it requires rounding or not. So I didn't round any of my answers, missed out on a boatload of points, and yeah, it was disappointing. So there's my gripes with the case, but let's solve it. So the first bonus, how many total land, port, and canal cells are there? So I just highlight all of these, give them a 1, Control H, and I'm going to remove this, replace it with 0, nice and easy. Highlight those, there's 410. So 410. Which ship type is used most often? So if you've seen my other cases, this is just my most of lambda. And then my case questions lambda. And this big ship appears 36 times, so big and 36 times, so 36. Okay, then these rely on the questions, so we'll come back to those later. So this first question is just asking us to multiply the numbers together, so obviously we have to remove the t, so we'll go text before this, the t, we want to multiply it by this. Question 1, nice and easy. Okay, question 2, I need to load a ship up to its maximum capacity. So let's come up here and unmerge those. Move this across, and we'll call that attributes, and we'll call this ship, and we'll call this headers, just so I can pull them out in case I get confused about what any of the metrics are. We'll call this goods, and we'll call this goods weight. Okay, so let's put our headers here. Let's find values for our ship. So let's look up the ship and return the attributes. So I'm just going to extend those a bit so we can see them a bit clearer. And our capacity in units is 80. We also want to find out about the goods. So let's XLOOKUP the goods and find out the weight. There we go, so the weight of iron is 0.9, so we want to do the weight multiplied by the capacity plus the base weight of the ship. So that's our total value. Let's drag that down, and this is our answers. Next we have exactly the same thing, but the ship cannot be loaded past its maximum capacity or exceed its maximum weight. So let's do that again. Let's just pull the headers so I don't get confused about what's what. So this time we want to figure out how much capacity we have left. So we're going to take the maximum weight minus the base weight of the ship. So that gives us our spare capacity. We then want to divide that by the weight of the goods. and that's going to tell us the maximum number of goods we can put on board the ship. However, we can't have decimals there, so let's take it down to the nearest integer, which is the int function. So we can fit 64 goods on this ship. Now, the amount of goods we put on a ship cannot exceed the maximum units capacity here, cannot exceed 80. So actually we want the minimum of each of these two values. So let's do minimum of that and this. So that's how many goods we put on. So we want to do how many goods we've put on the ship multiplied by the weight of the goods plus the base weight again. This one we have to round to 1 decimal place, so let's be careful of that. Let's round it to 1 decimal place and done. Another thing that annoys me about the rounding in this case is sometimes it's 1 decimal place, sometimes it's 2 decimal places. It's just kind of annoying. And then this is annoying that the cells move around. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and put these into the right place. So I'm going to move my formulas across, and the coal needs to be here and the ship needs to be here. And that way when I pull this formula down, I'm going to pick up the correct values here. So let's do that now. And what's this? Now we just want to know the net profit. So we have the cost. This one we don't want to round for some reason, so let's move our rounding out. And that's our cost. We've got the distance, so we know that the cost is just the weight times the distance. And for this one we want profit, so we want to do the revenue number minus all of that stuff. So that's our answer, 48. There we go, and now this is where it gets a little more complicated because we want to know the distance on the map. I'm just going to remind myself of the bonus questions as well in case I've missed any of those. So in level 3, one combination, that's exactly 58 tons. What good is it? So 58 is here, so that is grain. So let's do that one, grain. And the next question is, across 6 and 7, which route takes the longest amount of time? So when I get to question 6, I'm going to remember to do that one, and then everything else is dependent on the last question. So what are we at? Question 5. Okay, so now we want to know how long it takes to get to each of those locations. Now this is where you can use circular references on a map. I'm going to delete all this stuff out. And the ships are always going to go from Port Excel. So Port Excel is our start destination. So we're going to call that 0. Then we want to do equals the minimum of everything around this cell plus 1. So if I extend that formula out, it's going to look for everything around it, it's going to find the 0, and it's going to add 1 to it. If I now do that across all of the C cells, I'm going to get a distance from Port Excel. But we have to put circular references on so it can do it. So let's do that. Let's copy that formula. We want it in all of these cells here, except for our starting cell. Control-Alt-V, F is formulas. And then we want to turn circular references on. So it will actually calculate. And there we go. We have all our distances. The only problem is we have land cells. So we want to remove those. So Control-H, let's get rid of any land cells like so. We still have a couple here because they have a border on them, so I didn't pick them up in the format. And I think we are done. The only problem is we need to close off these canals as well because they're not open yet in this question. Cool, and now I can go XLOOKUP our location in this table and tell me the address. My mouse sometimes unclicks when I'm highlighting things. So there we go. Then we can say indirect of map and that cell. And we have a distance of 84. Let's actually drag this up so you can see it for the example as well. And then we want the speed of the ship. So we want to do XLOOKUP the ship and give me, so XLOOKUP that in the ships, give me the attributes again. And I know that speed is the last one, so we do the distance divided by the speed, which will give us the answer. And again, we want to round this one, but to 2 decimal places this time. So let's do the rounding. There we go. So let's drag that all the way down. And these should be our answers. Now question 6, we want to combine, we want to do the goods multiplied by the distance, but we've got to calculate both. So the goods and the ship type is there, so let's move these so that we have them in the same place. So the goods need to be here, and the ship type needs to be, is it here? No, the ship type is going to be here. And we can copy this stuff. That's what I mean about it being clunky with all these things. So here's the ship, here's the goods, there's the minimum goods, and then here we don't have a revenue number to pull off. We just want the cost times the distance. So let's assume our distance is going to be in this cell here. So I'm going to move this across. Then we're going to do our calculation here. And what did we have here? Yeah, that was our distance, right? So again, I've got to move this across. How annoying. Right, now I have the distance. So we want to times that by, Jesus, times our amount by the distance and round to 1 decimal place. Okay, that's all our answers here. So that might have looked a little complicated what I did. So I've looked up the ship attributes, I've looked up the goods weight, I've figured out how many goods we have on board, and I've done the number of goods times by the weight of the goods plus the base weight of the ship multiplied by the distance, which is calculated as it was in the last question. So let's get those answers in. And this is question 6, so I also actually want to know how long each route had taken. So let's put our bonus in here so I remember for later. Bonus, and I want to know the speed, which is, so distance divided by the speed of the boat. That should be how long each one has taken. So I'm going to copy that as values for later in case anything I do on the map changes, like the distances and whatnot. Okay, and the final hardest question basically says that certain ships can now go through certain canals, and each time they do it costs $150. So again, we need to find the cost for shipping each of these goods. So for this one, we are going to first of all open up the canals. So let's copy our formula into here. And then we're going to set up a data table for the answers. So let's say example 7 equals XLOOKUP, example 7 in B, and we want to return G to I. Okay, and the trick with this one is that large ships cannot travel through any of the canals. So I'm going to adjust this formula to say if this, which is the ship, equals large, then we will do blank, otherwise we will do our original formula. And let's apply that to both of these canals so they open or close dynamically. Then medium and small can go through anything, so that doesn't matter. And then we need to add that big can go through table, but not indirect. So the indirect is the purple one, so big ships cannot go through this. So let's do an or if it's big. So change that to big. And then our canals will open or close dynamically as the question number changes when we get to a data table. Next up, we want to determine which ones actually go through a canal, so which starting locations or ending locations. So let's keep the colors there so we can easily do this. So we can see that V14 goes through the brown ones, so let's say 1, U24, sorry, V14 was here, U24 is here, so that also goes through. AE here goes through. I can tell they go through because the number gets smaller as we go towards the canal, which means that's the shortest route, so it's the one they would take. This does not, because it gets shorter going this way. That means everything else up here also gets shorter going that way. So that's that. Then I want to know if they travel through the table canal, do they travel through the indirect one? So that gets smaller up towards that. So yes, they all do. And then again, we can just work one by one. So AC10, so everything above will. So that's AC10, anything in U, anything in M. So MU, those ones, and AC10. So they're going to go through. J19 is here. So that also goes through. Then C7 does, which is here. I think that's it. So this is the starting port or ending port. No, starting port. And then these three, D10 does not. Anything in B and anything in D. So 2 in D, 1 in B. Okay, so that's right. Then let's do our amendment for if we have a large. So let's say equals if the ship equals large, then 0, otherwise 1. And we can copy that formula to all of these cells. So again, it's now dynamic, and it will say a 0 when the ship is large. And then big ones cannot go through the indirect, I think it was. Yeah, big ships cannot travel through the indirect. So let's amend this to include the big ships as well. There we go. Now we have a dynamic model that should work. I'm just going to put zeros in here. I don't think it will matter, but I want to anyway. Then let's pull our calculations from before. This should give us our answer. So we want to pull the ship type to get the attributes, and then here we want to pull the goods, which are here, and then we have the total number of goods, and then we want to do, so what do we want to do? The number of goods times by the weight of the goods plus the base weight of the ship. Let's just put the headings up here again to not get confused. All right, so I think that's good. So now we can do our calculation. So weight is this. Distance is going to be X lookup our port in here, return the location, and we want to do indirect of that to pull out the value from our dynamic map. And then canals is going to be X lookup our location here and return the canals. That's going to give us an array. So we want to sum those, which is going to tell us how many canals we go through. And then our total is going to be the weight times the distance plus our canals times 150, because it costs 150 to go through each of the canals, which is listed here. For the bonuses, we also want to remember to pull out the time taken. So the time taken is going to be the distance divided by the speed, which is here. And then we want to know how many canals we went through. So we want to know if this number is bigger than 0. So equals that bigger than 0. Let's convert that to a 1 or a 0. So if you do minus minus and then something that evaluates to true or false, it will give you it as a 1 and 0 instead. Then let's pull in our question numbers, and a data table should solve everything. It might be quite resource intensive, but let's give it a go. Okay, and that should be all of our answers. So that looks right. And then we want to know for the bonuses how many times we go through a canal. So that's just going to be the sum of these numbers here, which is 9. And then we want to know which game number took the longest amount of time. So the max of these, so let's do equals max of these times and our times that we highlighted from question 6 here. And the answer is 168, so we don't have that here. So we must have it in the other sheet. This one here, which is question 93. So let's plug in 93 and we should be done. So that's the case. I don't know if there's a faster way to do this one. I think this is one of those cases where you just have to churn through and you get there in the end. A little bit clunky with where the cells are and the rounding being in the example, not asking the question. I'm still bitter about it, but I'll get over it. The next case will be treasure hunt, so subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you next time.